Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Neil Harvey, former chairman of the States of Alderney Policy and Finance Committee, and now an important member of the Alderney Bird Observatory. We're going to take a look at the situation regarding Alderney's government. Neil, good to see you.
Good morning, Tony. Always a pleasure to see you and talk to you and chew the cud over all these important issues.
Well, first of all, what a load of public apathy we're seeing at the moment in terms of people being prepared to stand for the states and in terms of people turning out. I reckon we're down to 9 members instead of 10, 5 of which had walkovers. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
Yeah.
And of course, it came after the by-election late last year, when again there was only one candidate.
Yep.
And we await the next by-election, which I believe is in February, to see if we get any greater response. But if we don't, that will be 3 in a row where we've been unable to fill the slate, so to speak.
I mean, is it a sort of global situation, this, people fed up with politicians, or is it a little bit more specific to Alderney?
Well, I think there are negative forces at play on both levels. I mean, clearly the big brother of the UK has been a bit shambolic over the last 12 months in terms of leadership and what have you. Inevitably, that probably spills over a bit here. I think, I putting a positive slant on it, I would say it's perhaps because people in Alderney are beginning to get a better appreciation of the states members' role, which is far from turning up at a states meeting once a month or a committee meeting once a month. It's a big commitment to take on and do properly. And I guess most people would stand for the states in the past in the hopes of doing something good for the island, and that does require virtually a full-time effort if you really to try and make your mark on it and to make some improvements. So, the positive slant would be that people have a slightly better understanding of it. I guess, in a sense, every state is responsible for the success of its successor elections. If a state has been seen as being worthwhile, achieving things, that is more likely to encourage people to stand. And I'm not taking pot shots at anybody on the existing or the recent states, because I know how tough a job it is. People think there is if not a magic wand, at least a decent pot of money to do all the things that the island needs, and heaven knows it does need quite a bit doing. But the pot of money is pretty limited, frankly. And another factor that's not often considered is the need for project management experience in the states, probably in the civil service. And that has been a problem in the past. I know, I mean, my experience is years old now, but I know that the chairs of GSC used to tear their hair out because every year they produced a list of things that were planned for the forthcoming year. Not exciting things always, but infrastructural changes. Like the sewer down the road outside my house in Wide Lane. But the ability to project management, or the people to project manage those things has been pretty limited in the past. So I think there is. It's not just about money, although money is probably, or the lack of money is the overriding problem. It's also the mechanism to actually roll those programs out.
It was a shame, wasn't it, to lose those younger members, Annie Burgess, Chris Harris, Rhys Jenkins. Very, very difficult to sort of run a family and, be able to be a states member.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the stipend isn't much, is it?
It's not, and it's not just a simple issue. I mean, yes, you could theoretically, you could probably, against some protests, could increase that. I mean, it's obviously nowhere near the level of the Guernsey deputies. But there is another factor at play here too, which is that if you're a young person with family responsibilities, hopefully in some sort of employment already, you're going to be very loath to jack that in, even for a better pay. There's every likelihood that in 4 years you may have lost your job again.
Yeah.
The situation in Guernsey is much more stable. They have deputies there who've been there for years. Some might argue that's not always a good thing, but it does give some continuity and some confidence in opting for that sort of role in place of a more conventional employment. So there's no easy answers to this, Tony. Is pretty obvious. I've been digging back through my memory and my notes, and I think I saw the president's comments to suggestions of a commissioner. The only commissioners I can find that the government in the UK have appointed have tended to be for the Crown colonies, where there has been serious misdemeanor by prime ministers, executives, usually to do with hot money and drugs. And those seem to be the only occasions where they have unbidden interfered, shall we say, to try and resolve these issues.
I mean, thing is, Neil, that really we're Guernsey's child, aren't we? So to that extent, the UK government's probably going to say, well, if you've got problems, you want to refer back to Guernsey in the first place.
I think that's probably right. Sometimes it's like a family, though. You're almost too close to somebody in the family to see the light.
Yeah.
Going back in history, it seems to me the most effective intervention was in 1995 when the Home Office did a lengthy report into the States of Alderney, which at that time had a absolutely minuscule civil service. And it had about 25, 26 committees, unbelievably. And states members were literally making day-to-day decisions about which field the cow should be in. And I'm pleased to say that most of the recommendations in that report were adopted. But I think it took that sort of outside influence, if not intervention, to bring about change. The track record of the states themselves, including probably my time there, bringing themselves up to date and changing it in a modern world, the track record has been poor, frankly. I don't know where the current constitutional changes rest, but there are, as you and I both know, there are things that could be done quite simply if the attention of the law officers in Guernsey, who draw up the necessary legislation, can be focused on it. Like the nonsense of having an election every 2 years. It's absolutely ludicrous in this day and age. Probably 10 states members is too many. Whether that's cutting our cloth to, so to speak, I don't know. But why is it 10? It could equally well be 8 or maybe even 6.
Yeah,
maybe,
sure. Yeah,
maybe 6 with an increase in the pay or allowances they get would be a sensible way forward. At least we might be able to fill the 6 or 8 seats rather than struggling with 10.
Working on the basis that you went for 6, you're probably more likely to get consensus, aren't you, between members? I mean, this seems to be the problem the whole time here. Somebody comes in with a bright idea and it's shot down virtually straight away.
I think on the surface, there often is a great degree of consensus. During my time in the States, there were some fairly, bitter rows about certain states members that I won't go into now. But the fact remains that the voting was usually 8-2, 9-1, or even occasionally unanimous. So there was, even then, a fair degree of unanimity. But there's a difference between unanimity and consensus and people doing things. I mean, we produced one of many island plans, which was well thought out. It was discussed with all the states members. It was discussed with other people. It was honed down to the really key things. But when it came to allocating responsibilities to individual states members, that's when it started to fall apart. And of course, the basic structure of government here of having 10 or 8 or 6 independents may seem to those used to the political parties in the UK as an attractive idea, but it's not really terribly effective.
We can confirm that, can't we?
Well, there's no premium. You don't get re-elected for being a good team member.
No,
unfortunately.
That's right.
There is always going to be a sense of, I need to seek re-election. I need to make my mark. Sometimes the only way you can make your mark is by overtly disagreeing with others. Certainly not by necessarily cooperating with them. But then Guernsey, of course, has recently seen almost the demise of yet another political party there. And they are a much larger electorate, a larger government, and they are struggling to form political parties, which, if you do it properly with the full panoply of whips and everything else, is the way you get people to agree and move forward, at least as a majority, if not unanimously.
Very poor turnout for the election of the two Guernsey representatives, 30% of the voting population.
Well, I'd probably make myself unpopular here by saying it was a populist measure introduced by an earlier president that was meant to be a 6 month trial because there were complaints that it was undemocratic to have the state's representative, the Guernsey representatives, elected by the state's members themselves.
Yeah.
So a 6 month trial was set up, which has never ever stopped. I think the state's members probably have a better, closer view of the political acumen and character of the people who will be going to represent us in Guernsey. So I never did think the plebiscite was other than a populist measure to respond to appeals for this is undemocratic in a functional sense. It's not the best way forward, I don't believe. And maybe the electorate is showing that by their lack of interest in the whole. I mean, I think that is all part of the same thing, you know, our inability to generate enough applicants, people for the elections, the lower turnouts we're getting. It's all the same issue, really. And there is a, you know, there's a disappointment, a disillusionment, if you like, with political processes, as you said right at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, across Western Europe at least.
How is it we find that when there is an election and the committee members or committee chairs are elected, it's always new people that get the role? Now, is that because the others don't really want to have anything to do with it, or because the new ones are sufficiently persuasive to sort of say, well, you know, give me a go? Because
Well,
we've seen that
yeah,
on several occasions recently.
I mean, I understand the cynicism there that says those who've been through it don't want to do it again. You know, how many times do you want to be beaten up? So there is perhaps a degree of that. I mean, speaking of the present turnout, I mean, I know the two latest candidates or appointees, I suppose we should call them. I know them socially, and I think they are able, intelligent, and well-meaning people. So good luck to them. But again, it's another nonsense of the system. Not only do we have a 2-yearly election, in other words, just virtually pulling the states up by the roots to see if it's growing. We do that every 2 years. Even more ludicrously, we elect chairman to the committee every single year. So you know that is farcical. You can't get any continuity. You can't start a project and hope to see it through because they're not going to be quick. These projects, they are, some of them, several years. And if the states members and the states aren't looking to 5 years, 10 years hence, who on this island is? You know, it's I think it's, you know, structurally the states is a bit of a shambles, and there's no disrespect to anybody who's actually on it.
It is what it is. But you know, sort of looking at the current chairs of PNF and General Services, we've seen this before, haven't we, in previous elections? Surely you need a little bit of experience in the way government runs before you can take on these roles.
Well, I think that would certainly, as in any job, that would be advisable. And my concern is that if you have people who have been high achievers in outside life and are vigorously and involved, is that their level of frustration will mount pretty rapidly when they find out how few levers they have to pull to make this whole island of Alderney move forward. It really is. I'm not being sort of totally depressed about it, and I think that you know, there is much wonderful about this island, but in a political sense, it's a bit of a nightmare, and I think it has been for quite a while. Which is why, as I say, I think we come back to this point. I saw the president of the States comments that he didn't want anybody from outside telling us what to do. We could sort it out ourselves. Well, I'm sorry, but we've not done so far. And frankly, unless something is done over the next 12 months, then I think outside intervention, hopefully by agreement, is really necessary. And as you rightly say, we've been under the control, and very often largely the beneficial control of Guernsey since the Second World War. So you know, they cannot be left out of any discussion about how we put our own house in order. The idea that Alderney might eventually become a parish, I don't know how attractive it is, because it doesn't mean we'd get all the bells and whistles they get in Guernsey, obviously, because of the distance involved. I suppose in my heart of hearts, I have a feeling that there is almost some inevitability about it.
Yeah.
that eventually Guernsey will. I mean, you've mentioned in the past, and I know it's on your list of questions about chief executives. We have been remarkably careless with our chief executives.
Can we just at this stage explain to everybody that's watching, because we have got viewers, in the UK, etc.,
Yeah.
and in other parts. In 2005, it was decided to replace the clerk of the states by a chief executive, and David Jeremiah was the first one, and he actually did his 5 years in 2005. Since then, we've had Messrs. Burke, Brownlees, Muter, and Ms. Jones. So in total, we've had 5 in 17 years. And my understanding is they're supposed to be 5-year contracts.
And one of my colleagues, my former colleagues, has pointed out to me that if you add in the inestimable Adrian Lewis, Stephen Taylor, and others,
Yes,
as temporary fill-ins, we've had something like 7 or so chief executives over not much more than a 10-year period.
I was being kind, but what actually goes wrong with this? I mean, it seems to me up to a point that I hear that the states members carry out the interviews. I don't think if you're dealing with somebody that's on a salary potentially of £120,000, you as an ordinary person have the ability to do this. I think that you need to get professional advisors in to deal with the interviewing process.
Yes, I think you probably have a point. I mean, in my time, I was part of a small group of 2 or 3 with the president, and it might well have been the outgoing chief executive who conducted the interviews based on what headhunters, who I think were appointed by Guernsey, had identified as possible candidates. But I have to say, my experience there, the people that the headhunters brought to us had really no concept of what life, never mind politics, on Alderney was going to be like. And therein lies the problem. Unless you've come from a small island community and you've understood how it is to be stopped in the street and to be forever on duty, so to speak,
Yeah.
Equally not to be able to turn around to a legion of civil servants and say, fix this, unless you have that experience, real experience, rather than just, oh yes, I've read it, it's very difficult to get to grips with the role in a place like Alderney. I would have thought Guernsey must be getting heartily fed up of Alderney losing its chief executives prematurely like this.
Yeah.
Which I think, should be a lever, if you like. It should be something that might force the issue on reform in Alderney. So I hope that it does. I hope those in Guernsey say, look, we can't go on like this. We keep, you keep appointing chief executives and they last virtually 5 minutes and disappear off. That is no way to run an organisation.
No,
or certainly a state like this.
It's a total embarrassment, isn't it? Really, when you look at it from that point of view.
So,
hopefully they come up with somebody.
Well, I mean, if they don't, then we are halfway to becoming what we talked about, a parish of Guernsey.
Yeah.
You could envisage a future. It may not be attractive to many, and it will be insulting to those who value our independence. But you could envisage a future where we do indeed become a parish of Guernsey for all administrative and operational matters. We retain estates for ceremonial matters. We retain things like public works for the jobs that are necessary on the island. But all other key decisions are taken elsewhere with appropriate mechanisms to ensure Alderney's interests are properly represented. I mean, in a sense of the number of electorate, 2 Alderney representatives in Guernsey is significantly over-representation compared with the numbers of people and deputies in Guernsey.
Based on population.
Based on population, indeed.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we are independent, if only by virtue of the 20-25 miles of sea between us. That forces a degree of independence on Alderney, and it forces us to be involved in things that maybe are beyond the ability of the state's members or the mechanism within which they work.
Thing is, though, Neil, that the sort of savings that you could make in terms of cutting out a lot of duplication would be quite immense, wouldn't they?
Well, I'm not sure whether they would. I mean, I'm not close to the level of the civil service here in Alderney at the moment. You would certainly need some here. You could save on states members' salaries, but then, as we said, they're pretty modest anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure the savings would be vast. What I would hope to achieve would be, even if there are no great savings, is a more effective operation. And Guernsey is not without its problems. You wouldn't look at Guernsey as the best example in the world of how to run a government. So it's not the ideal model, but they are there, and we are where we are. So Guernsey, I'm sure, inevitably will have to play a part in all of this. But I think if I was in Guernsey and I was paymaster for some of these things, I'd be saying to Alderney, if the states don't come forward with a concrete plan that can be implemented reasonably quickly within the next 12 months, then we will seriously have to take a closer interest in what they're doing. Because, this constitutional reform, it's not a magic wand, but it would be a start, and it would help on some of these problems. And we've fiddled around with it for years.
And the thing is that last year it looked as if something was likely to happen. They had a debate lined up for September, which never took place. They then started working on the basis that the next election would be for 4 years rather than 2, because I think the original idea was to get something sorted within the next 2 years and then go forward from there. So really, we're back in the same old rut, aren't we?
We seem to be. And again, I know the role of the president, which is very ill-defined in any documentation, comes to the fore. We had to remind William Tate's predecessor occasionally, you are president of the states, not president of the island. And to my mind, the president of the state should be, has to take a key role in constitutional matters and in trying to push for constitutional reform. Because we all know what needs to do, but that horrible old adage of turkeys voting for Christmas keeps coming back, which is again why I say sometimes it needs some outside influence, somebody with a clear mind but knowledge of these situations to say, look, stop messing around, do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and that will improve things. And the states to accept that.
Yeah. I mean, the fact of the matter is the president, in terms of his governmental duty, is basically the Speaker of the House, isn't he?
Yes, in many respects. I know that they don't always agree with that, and I know that the states members are very jealous that they have a monopoly, a total monopoly on political matters, and so it should be. They are elected for that purpose. But if the president is to have a useful role other than beyond the speaker, even speakers of the House have sometimes driven these matters in the UK, so it's not unheard of.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I think as they do stand aside from the hurly-burly, they're on a different electoral cycle. I think that the president of the states is probably the key person to help to drive reform. But they do need help with that. They do need help. And at the end of the day, again, the old saw about, follow the money. Guernsey does pay for a lot of this. I mean, yes, we all pay our taxes, but Guernsey does pay for a lot of this. And when it comes to the reappointment of a chief executive and all these issues, which I think are beginning to get noticed in London. I mean, thank heavens we don't have quite the problem that Sark has with their 50-odd members of Chief Pleas. At least we're only talking about filling 10 seats. So, even big fleas have little fleas. So we're not in quite as bad a situation as Sark. But I think the question marks over democracy are starting to be raised a little in the Ministry of Justice. So I hear.
Is it really 50 people in Sark?
I believe so. Yes.
Well, I mean that's
they've gone from feudalism to chaos in one.
That's 1 in 10.
Yeah, so we're in a better situation than that. But I think that the last thing the British government and the Ministry of Justice, who are responsible for us, in a sense, would want to do is to intervene unbidden. I mean, obviously, if the states collectively said, "Look, we need outside help," then one would hope that, as the Home Office did in the late 90s, that help would be on hand with people with a broader experience, if you like. But who are used to dealing with constitutional issues.
If you're going to go in for government reform, we all know there are 3 branches of government. should the Jurats appointments be a little bit more open? Should they be elected?
Well, it seems a bit bizarre when we're having trouble finding candidates and electorate for the states members to be looking to extend that franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there could always be a case for doing that. I'm delighted to say that other than seeing them in their fine robes on occasions and walking down the street and knowing therefore it's Thursday, my contact with the Jurats has been purely social. So I can't speak too much about their effectiveness in court. But yeah, I mean the Jurats, as with magistrates and any no disrespect, lower level legal people, should represent the population, should be reflective of the population they effectively serve. So yes, you could well make it's always one of those mysterious things, isn't it? How Jurats get created. It seems to sort of come out of
Robert
thin air.
Robert McDowell did an article in the Current Journal, and he refers to something that was very, very important to the Conservative Party back in the 50s, the magic circle.
Yes, yeah.
And
the blob, it's known as now, I gather, in the UK at least. The blob that stops anything happening.
Let's have a look at some of the outstanding projects.
Let's.
Probably I can sort of say to you, Neil, you were involved in this one or you were involved in that one. Let's start off with the marina. What's happening there? Any idea?
I have no idea, Tony, but I was trying to find my copy of the Home Office report on constitutional matters, which I couldn't find, but I did come across a table full of marina projects, which out of sentimentality or whatever I kept, and they go back obviously long before my time. I don't know, Tony. I mean, I joined the Marina Advisory Group before ever I joined the States, and then and during my time on the States, I tried to enthusiastically embrace, a sensible project to get a marina built, despite all those who said, I've been trying to do this for 30 years, it's never going to happen. And unfortunately, the passage of time
it came to pass, or it didn't.
In that group of doubters. I have no doubt at all as to the beneficial effect if one ever got built. But both the fairly astronomical sums of money given, just look at the breakwater over the past few days and the harbour over the past few days, and that's not even with the northeaster blowing. So the costs of building a marina here will be mind-boggling. But I think, as a project and taking advantage of one of our unique selling points, as they say, our position in the top of the Bay of San Malo, first port of call coming across the channel. Yes, I can see quite a lot of benefits from it.
Yeah, but, it would make money.
And even if the money was there to do it and the project was there to do it, there obviously are people on Alderney who would not like to see any development, certainly not any development that affects the coastline. So, we can't ignore that. Hopefully, if that ever came to pass, they could be persuaded of the benefits and that a marina is not a blot on the landscape. But it's not just money, I fear. So no, our success with these major projects, which again, I come back to the point that if the states members would cut their 20 priorities down to 10 or maybe down to 5, and deal with the priorities they can really address, because they are local projects. They're not many £1 million projects. They are projects that probably could be funded, which would improve life on the island. And we come back to simple things, not simple, but basic things like the sewage system,
surfacing the roads.
Surfacing the roads, indeed. Yes. I started collecting pictures of potholes, famous potholes. I think we should probably hold a prize for the biggest, longest lived pothole on the island or something. Whoever brings that for the fore.
Being a bit, naughty, the airport. Do you think it's going to come in at 25 million? Because I see in recent correspondence there's a trigger point. If it exceeds by 10%.
10%, I read that, yes.
Yes, then it's all back to square one and throw a 66.
Well, I think that's the let out clause, isn't it? That
for Guernsey,
behind the scenes in Guernsey was agreed. And I know that I heard some of the debate, and some of them were saying, well, a lot of work has been done on this, and we're very confident that we can do this within the price. Well, Time will tell. I mean, that's why I have wooden desk, because I can clutch onto it whilst thinking about these things. It's not over until it's started, really. So, there's a way to go on this.
Yeah.
My view on it, well, I mean, if people said to you, would you like a long runway or a short runway, full stop, of course you say I'll have a longer runway, because that in itself would give you more flexibility going forward in the future. But of course, it's nothing like as simple as that. It's not just the length of the runway, it's all the other panoply of things. And I do sympathize with those who say the true operating costs of an upgraded airport have not been properly considered. Because that all has to be paid for, even if those are subsequently revenue issues for the future.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm trying to stand aside from all that debate. Yes, of course, a longer runway, a bigger runway, a better runway would be ideal. I'm also conscious that in my time in the States and since, there have been definitely delaying tactics on the part of Guernsey over refurbishing our runway, which frankly is long past its sell-by date. And I think that if conversations have not already happened, they will be happening pretty soon with the CAA saying, look, we've given you derogations and allowances, and because you said you're going to do this, but you've been telling us that for years and years and years. If you don't have a plan in place and implement it within a certain time scale, whether it be 1, 2, 3 years, you risk being closed down altogether. So I think the CAA must be deeply unhappy, and they have the powers to do that, of course.
Yes, absolutely. And by definition, a derogation is a temporary arrangement.
Absolutely. And it's been a temporary arrangement for
far too long.
For longer than you and I have been talking on these things. That's
absolutely. Sure. Yeah. Here's another one for you. I'm sure you were involved with this one. Fort Torgy.
Oh, dear. Well, I mean, again, let me go on a limb and say I like Fort Torgy.
Yeah.
I like all these ruins. They are a tourist attraction, of that there is no doubt. Some would say it's dangerous because of the the holes in the ground and the what have you. But that talk about doing it at Fort Torgy has been around almost as long as the marina. And again, the cost would be absolutely astronomical. We had one guy who wanted to, who was a serious developer on the island, who wanted to take it forward, and he wanted to buy it. But we discovered that whilst he was offering a fairly miserly £1 million or something of that order, by the time we had done all the things he required us to do, installing main services throughout, we would actually have been paying him to take it. Now, if that had been a really, really good project, creating employment and viable, we might seriously have considered that. But it was a private development, effectively.
So you'd leave it as it is?
I can't see any. I mean, you could waste an awful lot of time and breath on this, but I think that if we came back and had this conversation in 10 years' time, if we both spared Tony, we'd be saying the same thing. 20 years' time, we'd be saying the same thing. What I think is good is at least they haven't carted off the stone to build something else, which of course historically happened with it.
But an awful lot of time has been wasted over the years on it. That's time that could have been used more productively on other schemes that have got a chance of running.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to be, we have to take small bites at this eating this mammoth or whatever. We are not in a position to take on massive projects ourselves. We may promote them through others as effectively. Of course, the airport is a case in point. I come back to one of my favorite sources. It's not just the sewers and the roads, it's the harbour too, which somebody told me the other day, I hope it's true, that we are making progress with this new pontoon. Because let's face it, the landing arrangements for the small ferries, which are the only viable form of sea transport as far as I can see, have been appalling in the past. So if we can do something about that, because I think that is an area where human safety is a very real issue.
Oh, definitely.
One of those very few occasions when states members themselves could be personally implicated should there, God forbid, be a serious accident. I think it is long overdue to make some, not a marina. A marina would be lovely, but that's a different order of magnitude. But at least to make the harbour more user-friendly, which I think is possible.
Got a minute or so left before Mr. Zoom cuts us out totally, because I'm too tight to buy a license. Any views on housing, particularly affordable stuff?
not something I know a huge amount about,
Mm,
but I have contacts, including people who are trying to run the Connaught,
yeah,
and their biggest problem by far is recruitment, and a lot of that recruitment problem comes back to housing, doesn't it? So I can well understand the needs of young people, people who have growing families here, and those we probably need to recruit to look after us in our old age, Tony, from further afield.
yeah,
You cannot do that unless you can provide them with adequate housing at a sensible
absolutely,
price.
absolutely, yeah.
So again, I'm not sure exactly what the state's plan on that is, but that ought to be, again, one of those perhaps manageable chunks that they could
Mm.
bite off. Um,
On the
again,
priorities list.
yeah, well, I think it's pretty well up there. I mean, if we take out things like a marina as an unaffordable dream, we
Mm,
take out the airport as not directly our responsibility. If you take all of those things out, then what you're left with are the things we've talked about. You know, the roads, the sewers, the housing. These are things that, if our present states are to be effective, they could and should be tackling, and they
yeah,
may well be. You
yeah,
know, in fairness, it's a yet again, it's a new state formed only a week ago, I think, wasn't it, at the
yeah.
states meeting?
That's right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So we've got to give them a chance to get their feet under the table. But I think if the people of Alderney can find some way of expressing their priorities, hopefully the states members will take them on board
A
and
good,
will address the projects that are within their compass, both financially and to operationally to roll out.
an excellent way of finishing the interview, Neil. Thank you so much for sparing me some time today. Really enjoyed it as ever. And we'll just have to see what happens, won't we?
We will, Tony. In the meantime, we can go out and collect up our dustbins from wherever they've
Yes,
blown.
absolutely. We did have a bit of a howler last night, but there we are. Anyway, many thanks. Really appreciate it.
You're very
Bye.
welcome, Tony. Good to see
Bye.
you. Bye for now.